Amazing. Good. All right.
Hello there, and welcome to Senator Rebel Chancellor, who is Mon Mothma, a panel dedicated to discussing the role and characterization of Mon Mothma within the Star Wars universe. It's an honor to be presenting this panel here at Star Wars Celebration here in Japan. Before we begin, let us introduce ourselves. Hi, my name is Ash. I use any pronouns. I can be found online at Visual Mothma and Mothma Updates. Mon Mothma is my favorite character, my entire life, my everything. I was lucky enough to meet Caroline Blackston in 2023. Kind of embarrassing. I can be heard screaming in the live stage video where Genevieve O'Reilly was there in London in 2023. I've had internet posts be featured in Mon Mothma articles. I cosplay as Mon Mothma, and I've been working on this project since late 2022, so it's about 2.5 years worth of work. My biggest goal in this life is to get to write an in-universe Mon Mothma biography. And now to my moderator slash handler.
Hello everyone, I'm Duai. I use him pronouns, and I can be found on Blue Sky at L/Sabersmith. I've been a Star Wars fan most of my life, and I've always found Mon Mothma to be a fascinating and frankly underrated character. So it's been really cool lately to see her getting a lot more love, especially with projects like Andor. So as Ash mentioned, I'll mostly be moderating and making sure she doesn't go off on too many tangents. I will do my best.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Luai, for helping me out with this, keeping me on track. It does mean a lot. You know me. So what are we talking about today? Mon Mothma, obviously. First, I'm going to go into some things to know about Mon Mothma, for those of you who might not know some certain specifics. Then we'll move on to some of the great works that Mon has been a part of and talk about her role and characterization. And with that, we'll be talking a little bit about the evolution that her character has undergone since the Disney acquisition over a decade ago, and what that has meant for her development as well. After that, we'll have a little question period where you can ask me other things about Mon.
Awesome. Well, I think it would be good to start off with a baseline. So let's ask the titular question: who is Mon Mothma within the wider Star Wars universe?
Excellent question. So Mon Mothma was born on Chandrilla, presumably in the capital, Hana City. We don't know the specifics of that. She was born around 48 BBY. Again, we don't know the specifics of that. It's the closest that we have given the other information that we know about her, namely that she was new to the Senate when the Naboo crisis of 32 BBY happened. She was 16 when she was elected senator of Chandrilla, and you know, after, like, that was her role before she left the Senate to join the rebellion full-time, around 2 BBY. We'll be seeing that play out in Andor. We've seen it play out in Rebels as well. And then she becomes the Chancellor of the Alliance to Restore the Republic. After that, she becomes the Chancellor of the New Republic in 4 ABY. She married Karen Bertha at the age of 15. And in accordance with Chandrillan custom and tradition, and gave birth to their daughter, Leda, at about age 30. The role of Mon Mothma was originated by Caroline Blackston in Return of the Jedi in 1983, before Genevieve O'Reilly took over the role in 2005 for Revenge of the Sith. Her scenes were cut from that film, but we were lucky. She got brought back for Rogue One, and then they brought her back again for voice acting in Rebels, and then we got her again in live action in Andor and Ahsoka. Kat Susi voiced her for all 15 lines of dialogue that Mon had in the Clone Wars. Many people recognize her not by name, but for her iconic line from Return of the Jedi. Many Bothans died to bring us this information. The line is a classic for a reason, and there's really no shame in not knowing a character who had never been named on screen in a live action scene, aside from things that were thrown on the cutting room floor, you know?
Awesome. Well, as is the case for a lot of Star Wars characters, Mon has appeared in many different stories across various different mediums. Naturally, we can't cover them all in our presentation today, so which of her appearances will we be exploring?
So the great works we'll be looking at here are Return of the Jedi, Aftermath Trilogy, Rogue One, Rebels, Leia Princess of Alderaan, No Contingency from a Certain Point of View, Princess and the Scoundrel, Andor, obviously. Wait, I said contingency plan the first time? I think so. I said contingency plan from a certain point of view, and then no contingency from Return of the Jedi from a certain point of view. And I will tread carefully with the Mask of Fear from Reign of the Empire because it's so stinking new and it's wonderful. I've chosen to explore these stories in release order rather than timeline order because it's way easier to explore character growth when going about it in this way. Prior to Andor, there were very few instances where it was acknowledged that she was an important and crucial character in Star Wars, and most of the stories that did that were novels, which is very interesting. I love to see it. Something of note is that Andor is the first instance of a non-cut live-action scene where we hear her name being spoken on screen. So huge shout out to Clea Markey for being the first one to do it in one of her first lines of dialogue in Aldani. This is something it took me a while to notice myself, and it still blows my mind that it took 39 years after the character was introduced for us to properly learn her name. One day we'll have a movie where her name will be said and it won't be cut.
One day.
One day. So the debut of Mon Mothma, 1983's Return of the Jedi, is important to Mon Mothma's story, mostly because it's the very first time that we ever saw her, heard her speak. But like also pretty much the thing that you go to when people are like, who's Mon Mothma? You're like, this scene here, this 26-second scene. And it's, you know, it's like Caroline Blackstone did such a phenomenal job with this, and when preparing for Revenge of the Sith, Genevieve O'Reilly like took notes off of that 26 seconds and absolutely cooked. And I'm so happy she gets to do more of that later down the road. But Mon was not given enough time on screen at all in this film. Like, where is she for the rest of the original trilogy? For someone who's so critical to the rebellion as a whole, it really kind of sucks that she's given one speech in the last film of the trilogy. And, you know, while I can somewhat overlook her not being named in this film, because it's like, why would the rebels need to be introduced to her? She's their leader. She just stands up, walks up, and they all silent. So there's that. But everybody else who speaks at that briefing is addressed by name and rank, specifically Admiral Akbar and General Nadine. And so, yeah, she's the only one during that briefing who speaks and doesn't have her name said by anyone. The scene portrays Mon in a very, very specific way. She's strong-willed but soft-spoken. She commands respect, unlike the leaders in the Empire who demand respect. And she cares about the lives lost in the fight, no matter how they are fighting, which is a stark contrast again from the leaders of the Empire, who is just like, you are a faceless cog in a machine. And she's there to bring hope to the rebels that they can destroy the Death Star and the Emperor with this battle, but she's also there to remind them of the importance and the critical nature of their mission. Without Return of the Jedi, we never would have had Mon Mothma become a character in the expanded universe, aka Legends. While we're not talking about those stories today, without them, many facets of who Mon Mothma has become would not be present. That was where we first got the idea that she would become Chancellor of the New Republic. It's where the planet of Chandrila comes from. We never probably would have had her as a proper character, but shout out to the Legends writers who were like, this character, we need to do something with them. And they did it so often, and it worked. And now, after this point, because it kind of just has to be this way, all of the stories that we're discussing are post-Disney acquisition. So the Aftermath trilogy is a phenomenal series, and Mon's appearance across these books grows with each installation. Mon's the Chancellor of the New Republic, trying to bring an end to the war with the Empire and oversee the transition of the rebels from an insurgency group to the leaders of the galaxy. The first book has only a few big Mon moments, but we see the beginning of the New Republic Senate and the announcement of the Military Disarmament Act, which is a very significant part of the story, both in the trilogy, her character timeline, and the New Republic as a whole. And then the second book, Life Dead, she turns down Mas Ameda's surrender, and there's a great bit there that later is kind of referred to in The Mask of Fear, but I'm not going to spoil it for you. And she plans Liberation Day to celebrate the freeing of rebel prisoners from Imperial captivity on Kashyyyk, even though the mission to do that was completely unauthorized, but it was successful. So she was like, I can't be mad at it now. And then on that day, she is shot by one of the freed rebel prisoners, and she nearly dies, but it's Mon Mothma who can't die. So she returns in the next book, Empire's End, and we see her dealing with the aftermath of being shot and having Senator Wartall running against her for Chancellor of the New Republic. He leaks information to the galaxy that sought to damage the war effort, while he bullied other senators into voting against sending New Republic troops to Jakku to defeat the Empire in the hopes of making her appear a weak leader. There is a single sour fruit involved that Mon uses to get back at him while her people scramble the votes that she needs to end the war. It succeeds, the war ends, and she faces yet another assassination attempt because my girl can't catch a break. And so she's still the Chancellor of the New Republic, but she's overseeing the restoration of peace in the galaxy with the Galactic Concordance. I think this trilogy did a really interesting thing of portraying her as a leader who knows what needs to be done, but also still has a lot of issues to deal with. She's not perfect, but she's the best choice for the people in this period of time when they need someone with a strong sense of how to lead. I think she evolves a lot as a character throughout these three books, and that's very important. She's working with a lot of people, like Leia, for example, who have never really lived in a democracy or had the ability to lead in a time of peace, and she has to work with that and help them transition into peacetime leaders and leaders for a democratic government, for a republic, really. And then we have Alexander Free. We're starting off with the novel by Alexander Free for Rogue One, because it had a little bit more time to explore the events and characters of the story than the film did, and I think that the expansions that we get to see in this novel are wonderful. While she's a minor character in the film, still not named, Mon has additional moments that grow her in the novel. She is one of the this is one of the reasons, along with Contingency Plan, why I was super hyped for The Mask of Fear. This novel is where we got the concepts of Mon being a student of history before going into politics, her love of Smashball, and we got some glimpses into her life that was something that we'd never seen before, because we never had her point of view before this. She's becoming more of a character rather than a symbol that we could never really know or understand. We're also given glimpses into her files, which was something phenomenal that Alexander Freed did. And so we get to explore the history of the Rebel Alliance and her thoughts on Jyn Erso. Things that wouldn't have really fit into the film, but as fans we should be super grateful for. And obviously the film holds a very important, special place in my heart, especially when I look at it from a Mon Mothma lens, which is how I like to examine things. Because this film marks the return of Genevieve O'Reilly and her true emergence in Star Wars as a character. Like for many other characters, the events in this film are incredibly pivotal for her. She goes from a woman who wants to bring Galen Erso to testify to the Senate about the Death Star to a woman who acknowledges that at this point in time, war is inevitable, and she's sending the rebel fleet to Scarif to get those Death Star plans so that they have some hope of exploiting the weakness that was built into it. While this growth may seem a little bit sudden, it was actually really a long time coming for Mon, and I believe that she'd been on the brink of this for a while. But after the events that had transpired on Jedha, like the death of Saw Gerrera, and Edu, the death of Galen Erso, she finally reached that tipping point and had to become exactly what was needed in the vacuum of Saw's leadership, because he's gone now. The way that she changes is a natural evolution of her character based on the things that she's experienced series throughout the story. During the pivotal moment of the film where the council is determining whether or not to send their people to Scarif to recover the Death Star plans, Mon doesn't even share her own opinion on the matter. She just takes the words of the others around her and works through that. She doesn't share any thoughts on the matter with anybody except for Bail afterwards. And she's just there to maintain civility and give the final verdict, which unfortunately isn't in Jin's favor. And I don't know her exact moment, like her exact feelings in the moment, but the way that she exchanges that glance with Draven and Lyric when it's announced that there are rebels on Scarif fighting, she's like, I knew that Jin was gonna do this, and I wasn't gonna stop her because, you know, she has a blaster now, so what would be the point? And I do think that she would have sided with Jin, knowing that, like if I tell her to go, she's gonna go. If I tell her not to go, she's gonna go. That's just the character that Jin Erso is. And, you know, at this point in time, they are a rebellion and an insurgency group. They're full of rebels. They can make these decisions if that's what they want to or have to do. They're not a real government. They have no legitimacy or optics to really consider. And so, just another shout out. I'm eternally grateful that they were able to book Genevieve O'Reilly for this film because she's just phenomenal as Mon Mothma, and she deserves everything wonderful in Star Wars that she's been a part of since Rogue One, especially Andor and, yeah, like Rebels, Ahsoka, you know.
She really has embodied the role, like made it her own thing, expanded it. As you mentioned a bit earlier, she was even able to make the jump from live action into animation when she portrayed Mon Mothma again in Star Wars Rebels.
Yeah, so the first time that we see and hear of Mon Mothma in Rebels is in Season 3, Episode 18, Secret Cargo. The Ghost Crew essentially is on a mission to refuel the ship of somebody that is close to Bail Organa. They don't know who, and they get founded by the Empire. When the Empire attacks, they have to just bring everybody onto the Ghost. So rest in peace to the Chandrilla Mistress. You were a beautiful ship. We miss you. And this was after the fleeing of Mon from Coruscant because of the Gorman Massacre, which Andor fans, we're not gonna be happy. We're gonna be very, very sad for the next month. Because we're gonna be seeing that play out in Season 2. So they ultimately arrive at Dantooine. Mon gives the speech to unite the various rebel cells across the galaxy and work together as allies. And much of her role in this series is being the leader that has to teach characters like Ezra about the way that things have to be done instead of the way that they want things to be done. Because, yeah, it would be great if they could help everybody, but they can't, because that's just not possible with the way that resources work. And as she points out, like, you know, if we help your world and we help my world, what about all of these other worlds? We can't afford to be selfish in a way, right? And so, yeah. And then in Season 4, Episode 3, In the Name of the Rebellion, Part 1, she has her little face-off with Saw Gerrera, where they disagree about the way that each of them are going about fighting the Empire. I personally have never even read this scene as them thinking that the other wasn't good enough or disrespecting the fight that each of them are going through, because they're very different people, very different leaders, and they need to be able to fight differently. And so it's more like the way that they're disagreeing about tactics more than anything. And I think that people see Saw's most important words to Mon as being about how when they lose, they lost by fighting according to the rules, which is how things will end if they continue to utilize the tactics that they are, which is obviously an important line, but I think the most important thing he says to her is after she snaps at him and starts raising her voice, because he knows that her power is in her words. He knows that she wasn't listened to in the Senate, so why is she kneecapping herself now and not using her power? And yeah, so I think that when it comes to Rebels, those two episodes are really what we have to look at because of how they are really the ones that allow for a deeper insight into her character.
Agreed. I think Rebels definitely helped to solidify Mon's importance for mainstream audiences who may not have delved deeper into a lot of quote-unquote background characters. And of course, for the crazier fans like ourselves who crave more depth and detail and monotony to our stories, we return to the novels.
Of course we do. We always return to the novels. So Leia, Princess of Alderaan by Claudia Gray is one of the best dives into Mon Mothma's character, in my opinion. Prior to the Andor series, not only does it expand on her character and who she is in relation to Leia, we also see her at work in the Imperial Senate, moonlighting for the rebellion, and the relationship between Mon and Leia's parents, Bail and Breha Organa. The fact that she's able to grow so much in this book really shows that the story does not need to lean heavily on her as a character in order to actually provide new insights into who she is. So long as the person in control of the story cares to add these new details to her characterization. Subsequent stories, including The Mask of Fear and Andor, make aspects of who Mon is in this story even more upsetting and interesting. And that is very important to her story as well, because again, she can never catch a break. The story takes place within the years of Andor Season 2, about a year before Mon will leave the Senate, and it occurred to me the other night that this is probably taking place in the same year that Lady gets married, so there's that. And so the novel is able to add on to these things without focusing on the things that Mon is doing outside of being a mentor to Leia and a bridge between Leia and her parents. That's not really what the story is about, but Claudia Gray is able to provide so much on the front of Mon that it really ties her and Leia together that stronger than most other writers have been able to achieve. Leia would know that Mon has a husband and a daughter who's probably getting married, but Leia never brings them up, and there has to be a reason for that. Maybe Leia just doesn't like Karen. Maybe she just doesn't like Luna. Who knows? And my favorite scene in this book, I bring this up because it's also one of my favorite all-time favorite Star Wars scenes, is the dinner party. There's a trend that has begun to emerge where Mon pretends to have affairs with various people to avoid Imperial scrutiny. We see her do it in The Mask of Fear as well with Senator Lud Malloy, and I do believe that the building blocks are there for them to pull this in Andor Season 2 with Tay Kolma and maybe somebody else, but I fear that one would be too crazy to say, so I'm gonna keep it quiet for now. But if it happens, I'm gonna be like, I'm going crazy. And so like as the viewers of Andor, we know that Mon does not have a good marriage with Karen, and the Imperial spies know this as well. And so like the scrutiny is going to increase. And as an outside observer who is trained to see the worst in Mon Mothma, don't you think that that's something she might do if you put yourselves in the shoes of these like Imperial intelligence agents? That's just what I want to feel about it. Alexander Freed's From a Certain Point of View story Contingency Plan is his second real exploration into Mon Mothma following the novelization of Rogue One, and it's important to note that he wanted to explore Mon further, and he just keeps winning in that regard, and we keep winning in return. While there were scenes in the Rogue One novel that were from her point of view, it wasn't her story, whereas this very much is. For me, this short story is the first real and solid evidence I can point to that suggests things that are later explored in other stories that feature Mon as a prominent character. For example, we later learn that Mon has an anxiety disorder, which checks out in The Mask of Fear, and while that's not really explored in this story, there are parts of this that link to the idea that spoke to me as someone who recognizes the signs of anxiety from my own life. We see a lot of her struggles here that are later built upon, such as the aforementioned anxiety and her struggles with self-worth as a leader. While I would love to go about my day thinking that Mon never was one to think about giving up and throwing in the towel and surrendering, I know that she's only human, and if she thought it was the only way to protect millions, if not billions, if not trillions of others from dying, I do think that she would sacrifice herself. That's just who she is, and we've seen it time and again. It's not really something that she can help. In in a setting where she has a chance of standing against the Empire, she'll do it. But if the odds are not in her favor and other people are at risk, that's where we see her struggle the most. Because again, she cares about the human cost of rebellion and what she's doing. And so, yeah, it's again a marked difference between her and some of the other rebel leaders that we meet. I'm not saying that they don't care, but Luthen and Saw do like kind of lack some of the things that Mon has that is much more, I guess, soft or gentle, or I would even say compassionate, right? Because Luthen is just a very tough guy. Saw is a soldier. He's been at war for decades now. So the fact that he's just like, if people die, that's just the way that the cause has to, work. It works for him, it doesn't work for her. She doesn't want people to die at all. She cannot stomach it. And her strength isn't measured in how well she can shoot a blaster or wield a lightsaber like some of the other rebels. Her strength just comes from her words, and there's only so much you can do with that. Like, yes, the pen is mightier than the sword, but you can't talk your way out of surviving an encounter with like Darth Vader. It won't work in your favor. And I think at the end of the day, she's a stronger character than most people would give her credit for, because she has a lot of those softer personality traits. And I think that there's a reason that she's the leader of the rebellion and the New Republic, and she remains Chancellor for so long, is because people want to follow her. They believe in her leadership. And this story is able to go into the anxieties that go along with being that leader. And so next, we have The Princess and the Scoundrel by Beth Revis, the 2022 novel that came out like 5 weeks before Andor. And it becomes incredibly tragic when you take that book and then you look at Andor season 1 and you're like, oh, this is what we got in the span of a couple of months, because it hammers a lot home. And the first time I read it, it wasn't very tragic, and then every subsequent reading, I'm like, this hurts. Her novel is much like in her role in this novel, with much of her role in a lot of pre-Andor stories, is a supporting one. She's helping Leia plan her wedding to Han in the aftermath of the Battle of Endor. She's the one begging her to go on a honeymoon, so much so that she literally gifts a honeymoon to Leia and Han. She talks with Leia about how proud Bail and Breha would be of her, and when we considered all of the things that we learned about Mon and weddings in the subsequent months of 2022, that's where the tragedy comes in. Ominous foreshadowing indeed. And so like we in 2025 are about to witness Mon planning yet another wedding, but this one's gonna hurt so much more. She's gonna be very not thrilled about it. Andor's gonna hurt. I think there's a significant aspect of her insistence that Leia have a proper wedding and a honeymoon and take some time for herself. And I think it's that she doesn't want her friend, someone who could also be seen as like a daughter to her, she doesn't want her to end up like her. Because at this point in time, like, yeah, we didn't know Karen and Leto when this book came out, but it's like, where are they? Where are they, my dude? What happened to your family? Why are you all alone? And yeah, because like after the events of Andor, we have very few stories with Mon that take place after, that came out after Andor, that take place after Andor in the timeline. Yeah. So it's like, wait, what happened to Karen and Lita? Karen is, I don't really care, but Lita, I care. And so, it hurts. It's why I'm scared for Andor season 2. And while her role in this novel is a little bit on the smaller side, it's incredibly significant. It maintains its impact and becomes more significant. And that's why I would consider it to be one of the most important novels for Mon, probably leading up to Andor season 2. She's just come from one of the biggest battles of the war, preparing to lead the galaxy, and she's still finding time to celebrate and experience joy and make sure that those around her are going through the same thing. So.
remiss if we didn't discuss the story that truly elevated Mon from a background figure into a primary protagonist of her own story. We've been hinting at it basically leading up to now. The show that took the Star Wars fandom by storm. Andor.
I love it. Andor is agreed. Just every time I look at that poster, really. Andor is Mon's biggest role on screen to date. Even though we only have half of it, there's gonna be more Mon Mothma soon. It's not gonna be happy, but it's gonna exist. And while other shows and other stories have told her story as a politician, admittedly one very limited by the landscape that she lives in, this series goes well beyond that, and she's not just a politician trying to navigate through a crumbling democracy that's on a very, very slippery slope into fascism. She's also allowed to be a woman, a mother, and just a person with feelings and emotions, which it's about time that happened, you know what I mean? And she still has politics in her day-to-day life. She can't escape it. She's a politician. It's her job. Something Karen seems to not understand, given that he doesn't want to talk about politics ever. And yet at every turn, outside the Senate, in the Senate, she has people challenging her, demanding more from her. She's got Luthen demanding more money from her. Compliance is what the Empire is demanding of her. And her family just wants to, they just want her to be likable. They just want to not be angry at her all the time, I guess. She just remains at odds with them, though, because she can't help them. She's like, you want me to stop being myself? Not happening. I have to be this way. This is just how I function. Throughout the first season, she's trying her very best to provide what she can, where she can, but there are roadblocks at most turns. She's being watched by the Empire day in and day out. There's nowhere she can really hide, and for the most part, very, very few people she can genuinely trust with everything. The Empire just wants to force her to comply because she's a pain in their butts, and they don't like that. I can't imagine why. The Empire is, a very, very big roadblock to get around. And she's struggling with this for like a decade and a half at this point. And yet, if she can be pressured into behaving in accordance with their wishes, the ISB maybe might stop following her around all the time. Sorry, I keep looking at you, Beth, but I know it's 11, but Dedra's innocent on this count. And of course, she's not gonna just buckle under and let the Empire tell her what to do, whatever the cost is. And she's just gonna plant false information and be like, Karen, it's your gambling. And he's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And it worked. Like, that argument works because Karen's telling the truth. She didn't ask him to lie. He was just being honest. I hope. Maybe. Anyways. If he's lying, it's not because she asked him to. But she's never going to be the person that's loyal to the Empire, and underestimating her. Biggest mistake Palpatine and his government could have possibly made. Luthen has been receiving approximately 100,000 credits from her monthly up until the first time that we see her in Andor, and yet he's still asking for more money. And there are so many jokes bouncing around my head right now, but they're gonna stay inside. But he cannot fathom the idea of Mon not continuing to provide that. Because it's like, yes, he's using it to fund rebel activity throughout the galaxy. A worthy cause. Yet, if Mon is found out, that money will stop indefinitely, and she will die, and Luthen will die, and so many other people will die. And we don't know what happens to Luthen. but it can't be anything good. But he's very much ignoring and dismissing a lot of the risks that she is taking in order to continue funding the rebellion, and it just sucks because he's just out here dismissing her, and it's just like, no, like, he's like, yeah, they're watching everybody, but they're watching her more because she's influential. She is a politician. She is the one that you're going to be watching, and so yeah. When the new rules of the Empire threaten her entire life, her livelihood, her family, her ability to continue participating in rebel activity, it's not a good thing. She needs to find somebody that she can trust. And I'm going to talk about him in a second, actually. But again, like, going off of that, she's not the person that the Empire wants her to be. She's not the person that her family wants her to be. Like, Karen seems to detest politics and politicians, but at the same time remains friends with people like Sly Moore, and he thinks that she's fun while she's actively making the lives of other people worse. So it's like, he's not apolitical, he's just complicit. And it's sucky. But you gotta sometimes, I guess, have a character like that to point to and be like, you suck. And with Belle, like, she kind of shuns Mon's attempts at showing any warmth to her, which is odd, because Belle scolds her about how the rebellion comes first and they take what's left, and it's like, yes, she knows that. She's been putting the rebellion first for over a decade, and it's like, yes, this comes from what Cinta says to Belle, but the fact that Belle is repeating it to Mon kind of stings. And I love Belle, but I'm like, your interactions with Mon, I hope there's more in season 2, and I hope we can actually have just like a genuine, happy hug. Mon needs one. And it's a stark contrast because while Belle says these things to Mon, she will be incredibly warm and affectionate with Lita, and she is also very supportive of other rebel characters, but it's a very different approach when it comes to Mon. And so we don't know exactly what Lita wants from Mon, but I'm presuming that at the beginning of Andor season 2, she's gonna kind of be happy because Mon has, I guess, given her what she wanted, which was this traditional Chandrillan marriage, which is an odd thing to want, seeing as it traumatized both of your parents. But hey, a kid wants what a kid wants, right? And aside from that, there's really nothing she can do to win with her family. And in my opinion, she really has only like one true ally in this show, and I hope that he remains her supporter and he doesn't do anything stupid or bad in season 2. I'm talking about Homa. Yeah! Woo! He doesn't even need to know why she's asking for what she's asking for. He's just like, I have the ability to help you, I'll do it. And that's the crazy thing. He asks for nothing in return. It's a stark contrast from how literally everyone else interacts with this woman, and it's nice to see, but I get why some people might be like, this is a little bit suspicious. I'd probably be suspicious if I was Mon, but hey, let's hope that that suspicion goes nowhere. I don't want it going anywhere. Much of Mon's pre-established character is also very present in the first season of Andor. I feel as though her presence in this series will ultimately be a touchstone story for her characterization in other stories, whether they be little small roles or big, like, leading lady roles. This isn't even me saying that stories that had her in them before weren't strong or consistent or anything of the sort. They were all phenomenal. But I do believe that there was not enough time spent with her before to really have that solid idea of who she was as a person. Or like, we have an idea of who she was as a politician, but beyond that, we didn't really know very much. And, you know, we're going to be filling in a lot of gaps. We are going to see the Gorman Massacre in season 2 of Andor. So glad nobody cheered. That was so weird. And like, we know that we're going to get the full scope of what that event means for her as a character, and for the galaxy as a whole. We're getting 5 episodes of it. I'm not even kidding. And like, we know that it's significant. It's why she leaves the Empire, right? But we don't have any information on it until now. And so, you know, we're going to be following that line that started in episode 4, Aldhani, and episode 6, The Eye, where she's talking about the plight of the people of Gorman, but she's not really able to do much until later on. But I do like that they dropped those threads early in Andor season 1. And so, yeah, it makes it super impactful. We're going to see that later down the road. Another thing that we get is when she's talking to Tay in episode 7 about her Separatist Coalition meetings, we see that come back in the Massacre of Fear. And that's a very big, important part of that story is her connection with the Separatists in this era. Like, would these meetings be taking place in the novel? Would we have the Reign of the Empire trilogy without Andor? No. And I'm really glad that they were able to take that one line where it's just like, oh yeah, my Separatist Coalition meetings, and run with it and plot out an entire book. Or an entire plot line for a character in a book. It worked really, really well, and that's one of the best things about the people who create and make Star Wars. You know what I mean? And like, at the end of the day, how do the events of the Andor series and things said by and about Han in Andor change the way that we view other works like Leia, Princess of Alderaan, and Princess and the Scoundrel? Like, Andor is Mon Mothma's breakout role, which is odd because she'd already been a character for nearly 40 years at this point. Wild. No Contingency, which is Fran Wilde's Return of the Jedi from a Certain Point of View short story. It was everything that Contingency Plan had and more, because it was able to build on everything that we've got since that story came out. She's still full of anxiety, struggling with her self-worth as a leader of the rebellion, and that continues on into the New Republic. But now she's slightly more confident. She's able to go on these big missions by herself that might mean her death. But especially in this case, she's the only one that could have done it. And, you know, that's a whole other thing that's, you know, it's like, why wouldn't you have made sure somebody else knew about this? Like, what if something happened to you? I think it was a little bit of hubris, but knowing that she's gonna live forever, I think we're good. And, you know, she very much in this story is inspired by the rebels that she leads, which is very nice to see, because, like, we know that she inspires the rebels, and it's good to see that they inspire her as well, because that's, you know, a nice thing to see when leaders are able to connect with the people that they're leading and learn from them. You know, being a teacher doesn't mean you stop being a student. And yeah. And so, yeah, she very rarely goes against the advice of everyone around her, her council, her advisors, and just goes off and does something super dangerous on her own. But she's gonna do it here because, again, she's the only one that knows about this. And we get a load of references to other things that relate to Han as well. Alexander Freed explored in the Rogue One novelization that Mon wanted to study history and be a historian before she finally went into politics. And in this story, she's going to find one of her EX droids, and these droids first appeared in the High Republic, Phase 2, and, you know, it's like they were used by the Pathfinders for the Republic. And this is just yet another insane little High Republic link that you can find within the Rebellion. But, like, I could be wrong here. I think it's one of the very first times that we see something like that, like a High Republic, like a direct High Republic reference, not by one of the architects of the High Republic. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. And, you know, it's pretty great that they were able to do this in a Mon Mothma story. And as somebody who's like, I really think Mon Mothma would love the era of the High Republic, it was open for me. Because I was like, I'm taking this as evidence, and no one can take it away from me. So since the Master here, since it's so new, I'm going to tread very, very carefully. If you have not read this book, I highly recommend it. It's phenomenal. It would be a disservice to not talk about Alexander Freed once again in this panel, because he's done so much with the role of Mon Mothma, and I love to see it. He's up there with Tony Gilroy for me, for people who I trust with Mon Mothma. And for the first time in a canon novel, Mon is the main character. She's the main character, guys. Best day of my life. And I was excited from the moment that this book was announced. She's working in the Senate after the fall of the Republic and during the rise of the Empire. It's about a month after Revenge of the Sith, and there are just so many things that come up in this book and that are from Andor and Alexander Freed's other works that he's written for Mon in the past. She's trying to take power back from Palpatine to return it to the Senate because, you know, having one man make decisions for the entire galaxy actually sucks. And it's not a good thing. And it actually puts the Senate in a very tricky position where it's just like, oh, you guys don't actually matter at all. And yeah, she knows that he wants to be a dictator, but she is kind of stuck in her little timeline first of, it's very much a canon event when she leaves the Senate. And so she's just going to be a thorn in their sides for as long as she possibly can. Just keep getting into trouble, you know. She knows the Palpatine's evil, uses people to carry out his evil deeds. She was detained in the aftermath of the Declaration of the Empire and held in a very inhumane way, which we get a very horrifying glimpse of in the book, and it's a lot, which either caused her to develop anxiety or made it worse. But she's now on medication, which, good for her, she needs it. I don't know if she continues taking it, but she's taking it right now. She's working with the separatist leaders, as we know she's doing in Andor, and the amount of times that she almost dies is not zero. I wish it were. I would love a book where Mon is a very, very central character where she doesn't face any assassination attempts at all. There's also a trend emerging that I've mentioned before that I think we might see again in Andor Season 2, and I was like, once in Leia Princess of Alderaan, that's a throwaway. You bring it back in The Mask of Fear, a book linked to Andor, well, now they know what they have to do. And so, yeah, Freed is also able to further expand on the way that Mon is a student of history in this novel as well, because he has more time to work with her. She's the main character. She's a third of the book. The book's like 400 pages long. And so we get a lot of her. And I'm really looking forward to the other two books in this trilogy that we're going to be getting from Rebecca Brownhorse next spring. spring and ran wild in spring of 2027, provided nothing gets delayed. I don't want delays. I want it now. I don't have it right now. I want it. And overall, I think that it's one of the most important Mon Mothma stories thus far, along with Andor. Again, if you haven't read it, read it. Do yourself a favor. That's all I can say without getting into the nitty-gritty of spoilers, because I've written so much about this book. In conclusion, prior to the Disney acquisition, there is not much character work for Mon Mothma that's really significant. The Disney era has, while also still maintaining a focus on a well-known and beloved character, it allowed for many other characters to take the spotlight in a way that is more comparable to the EU and Legends, though it's more consistent because of the oversight, and we don't have stories that are just, it's just like, I don't know what you are, but you exist. And I'm not going to call out any specific book. Some Legends fans might know the one I'm talking about.
Yes.
I'm not looking forward to having to read it for this project. The Renaissance, as I have coined this era, has allowed for the growth and expansion of her character in the hands of many fantastic creators, both on and off screen, not limited to the ones that I've discussed here in this panel. Her role, even when it's a minor one, has become more important in stories, and while we're bouncing around her timeline, there's a lot that becomes extra tragic for her. And so, how much more can she endure? Don't answer that. Don't answer that, Star Wars. I don't want to know. But I fear we will know by the end of Andor how much she can endure. I think we should be grateful to first on a third season of Andor at this point in time. Season 2 is going to be very painful. But overall, she's come a long way from the brief moment that Caroline Blackson had in Return of the Jedi. I'm excited to see how she evolves from here, especially now that she's the main character. I never thought that this day would come. I'm proud of her. I'm so proud. Yeah.
Well, I am honored to have been included in this presentation and to help you with this in my own way. So, now, as we move into the question period, I actually had one for you.
Oh.
So, I noticed that a lot of the works that we covered in this presentation were written by Alexander Freed. You even mentioned that he's someone you trust with his character. As the, I'd say, preeminent Mon Mothma expert, would you say that Freed has established himself as one of the primary writers of Mon Mothma? Why do you think that is?
I think I would have to say yes. And it's mostly because he's written her so many times. He's written her 3 times now. And the way that the impact that he had on all of those stories, it exists.
Yeah.
And we are able to, we're going to see it a lot in the subsequent Reign of the Empire novels. It's yeah, of course they're going to be thinking back to the Mask of Fear. But, especially when we're looking at Mon, being a student of history, we see that in No Contingency. We see, people look at Andor and be you have anxiety, right? There's other elements of things that I think were, that he expanded more on that came from Andor as well, that were just kind of things that I was thinking about, but I was I never really talked about this, and I'm not going to talk about them here because we have 6 minutes left. But especially things that go with the struggles of her leadership and the way that, she deals with the self-worth issues as a leader. Because it's just it makes sense when you look at everything she's been through.
Yeah.
And so, huge shout out to Alexander Freed. He's never done anything wrong. He could, I don't think he, again, if I had to pick somebody to write the death for Mon Mothma, I would trust him with that. And I hope that that never happens. I don't want her to die.
No, that day will never come.
She will outlive the galaxy.
She'll outlive us all.
To make sure Palpatine doesn't come back. Does anybody else have any other questions? Throw your hand up. Yes. Please approach. Can you bring the microphone?
I don't know if it actually works.
this project?
The Courtship of Princess Leia.
Oh no.
Any other questions? Yes.
What was the point for you that you decided, like, this is your character and you're going to learn everything about this character?
So really for that, it was more, it happened very slowly and then all at once. I was apparently oddly attached to her as a child, and my grandparents had like the VHS of Return of the Jedi, and I would just rewatch that scene, which I see myself doing now as an adult with my Disney Plus, and it's an odd way to be, I guess. I thought it was perfectly normal. I was like, I just think she's interesting because, you know, she's obviously strong. They listen to her. She's obviously a good leader that they like, and she doesn't need to carry a blaster. And it was very inspiring to see a character like that for me, you know? So that's pretty much it. Yeah. Next question.
As a very, very brief question, but what do you think of the depiction in the Ahsoka series?
I was actually pleasantly surprised with the Ahsoka series. Overall, going into it, I was like, if I'm gonna have a Rebels sequel, I want it animated. And then, you know, I was like, I'll watch it anyways because I'm gonna enjoy the story, even if I'm like going to keep it animated. But I think that it was very interesting because once again, it's like, yes, she has the power now, but she's still limited by her office. And I think that that's very important for her in this period of time because she doesn't want to be another Palpatine. She wants to have that limited power. She wants to be in a position where she can't take the easy way out of being like, yes, no, I'm not listening to anybody else.
Since we all know that she's never going to die,
Yeah.
where do you think she is in Resistance Reborn?
Where do I think she is in Resistance Reborn? I think that, because we see General Riken, I feel like he broke Mon's calm. Like they were just like hanging out, chatting about the old times. He gets the call, and he's like, I need to break Mon's calm because she deserves to actually rest. He's like, I'll go back in, I'll handle it, but you rest. And then, so maybe other people think she's dead. I don't think Leia does, though. I think Riken would tell Leia the truth. Yeah.
Have you ever met Genevieve O'Reilly?
No. I wish. The closest I got was the Celebration live stage in London, where I was crashing out because she was there, and I don't remember anything that happened. I think I momentarily came back to life when Genevieve O'Reilly said take Holda's name, and then I died again. And you can hear me. You can hear me in the YouTube video when Anthony Carboni says, "Did you know that sometimes politicians have a secret double life we don't know anything about?" That guttural scream that you can hear right after that is me. The look on his face is priceless, and I have apologized for terrifying him. So, I think we don't have any time for any more questions though. I'm so sorry, but you can come find me afterwards. Thank you. This panel is just an incredibly shortened version of all of the research I have acquired and compiled about Mon Mothma and the way that she's been portrayed throughout her time as a character in Star Wars. But I will be doing the full uncut version of the canon portion of the Mon Mothma project on YouTube this summer. It's going to be at least 6 hours long. So I hope that you'll consider subscribing. You can find us at Mothma Updates. I'm the Mothma Net. We're about to finish off our countdown for Andor Season 2. Yeah, so I have some fun things planned for the channel for the summer and beyond. Again, finding me there. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to all the creatives who have helped the whole time. May the Force be with you!